All right, welcome back to Waste Some Time with Jason Green. I am Jason Green, bringing you brand new interviews right here on YouTube. My guest today, Steve Conte. Steve has a brand new record out called The Concrete Jangle, and Steve will talk to us about it. Talk about an amazing career. I think some of the bands that Steve is best known for probably weren't even his best forte in music. But this record, The Concrete Jangle, co-written with one of his musical heroes, Andy Partridge of XTC, really gives a chance to express himself. And that's the great thing about music. The people that Steve has experienced and come across in his life and worked with is a who's who of fascinating characters. We'll talk to Steve about all that and more right after this. Just wanna waste some time with you. Sometimes it seems too good to be true. Nobody out there to waste time with you. All right, and I first formally met Steve on the Monsters of Rock cruise. He was performing with Michael Monroe, and I wanted to tell him the story for years about how my band ripped off a song for him unknowingly. And before the end of this interview, I'll tell that story again. But please welcome Steve Conte. How are you, Steve?
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was you that did that.
Mhm. Yeah, that song that played in the intro, that's by my band Sincere Rejects, Richie Ramone on drums on that. And so, well, I'll tell the story real quick. We were working on this record, and guitar player told me I have a song that's influenced by the Dolls. It's inspired by the Dolls. I went, okay, and he said, "Can you write lyrics to it?" And I did. And then I said, "It didn't sound like a Dolls song that I knew that well." And we recorded it, and we thought we had a hit. And we posted a link to the first single. We called it "Mary Jane is a Punk." And people said, "Well, wait a second, that's already a Dolls song." I go, "Huh?" So we started doing our research, and there's 4 New York Dolls records with you on it, 2 studio, 2 live. And we heard it, and not only did we realize it's not inspired, we realized it's the same exact song. "Gotta Get Away from Tommy" would be the New York Dolls one. And we try to change it a little bit. It's on Spotify. I'm going to send you a link. Just don't sue me. But when we were on the cruise, I said, I got to tell Steve this story, because for the longest time, everyone was saying, "What are you going to do? Maybe we could license the song from Steve." And anyway, it didn't make that much money, so I think you won't have to sue me.
Well, that would be, well, I don't know who that would be. Probably Johansson and the Dolls and the record label. And there'd be all kinds of people who'd be wanting to sue you before I would.
Right. I'm hoping that they never
I'm
find
not
out.
that worried about it. But
So far, we're
I'm
safe.
flattered, but thank you.
Yes, well, it's definitely flattery. When you hear it, you'll go, "Whoa, I inspired somebody." But
Yeah, I don't think I've actually
anyway,
heard the song. I don't think you didn't play me the song. You just told me
no,
about it.
I'll have to send it to you. I don't think you heard
Yeah,
it yet.
please do.
But
And I'll be the judge of whether you borrowed or not.
that's what I think. You would be the ultimate decision maker in that, considering it's your it's yours. All right, let's talk.
Well, I wrote the music and Johansson wrote the lyrics, so
Right.
anything that's musical, it would be my part, and anything that's lyrical would be his part. But it sounds like you didn't use the words Tommy and "Gotta Get Away." So
Yes, I think we're safe in that capacity. We're going to talk about the Concrete Jangle, which I really enjoyed, and we're going to talk about your songwriting with Andy Partridge. But I want to go back a little bit before that, because you come from this musical home where everyone was playing an instrument, and by 7 years old, you started with the drums. Is that right?
that's right. Yep. I wanted to be Ringo. I heard Revolver, and that was it. I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life right then. 7 years
You
old.
you told an amazing story about hearing the Beatles first on one speaker, not
Oh yeah,
realizing what you're missing.
yeah, yeah. We had, I guess stereos weren't that big of a thing yet. In the '60s, we had a mono. We didn't have a stereo. We had a mono. We had one speaker. And so when is that my phone that's making all that racket? I hear it.
I didn't hear it.
I hear something like. "Wah, wah, 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 wah." I don't think it's me though. Anyway, Oh, it's an echo. That's what it is. I'm hearing myself echo. When we finally, we listened to all those records like Yellow Submarine and Sgt. Pepper and everything on one speaker. And so we didn't know that there was more music. And one day when we finally got a second stereo speaker and we hooked it up, all of a sudden, whoa, there's an orchestra. There's actually drums on this song. Oh, there's strings. We heard this full range where we'd only been hearing, maybe just the vocals and the band. We didn't hear like all the, fancy arrangement stuff. So it was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, that's the genius of the Beatles. There's a whole other world out there in a second speaker. 10 years old, you switched to guitar. And what has you make that change?
I was 11 actually, and it was because my brother, I was the drummer first, and my brother was the guitar player, and then I just picked up his guitar one day, and I started. I don't have an acoustic nearby, but I used to just bang on it, like because I was a drummer, So I remember saying, "Here, let me grab one." I remember saying to him because Simon and Garfunkel had just come out with like Mrs. Robinson, and I think there's a part where like Paul Simon sort of goes like, he kind of bangs. So I would just turn the guitar over and I would just like bang on it, like I'd play drums on it. My brother's like, that's not how to play guitar. You got to turn it over and hit the strings. I was like, oh, well, Simon and Garfunkel do it that way, So I was already, into the rhythmic aspect of, which I think is really important for a guitar player. You got to be into the rhythm first because, you're not going to pick it up and start being Van Halen, playing lead.
It could also be a percussive thing to your picking. There's drummers who've learned to play guitar. The sound of the pick is also part of that rhythm.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of acoustic gigs with other people, and I can always tell who was an acoustic guitar player first and who was an electric guitar player first, because the electric guys, they don't really know how to lay down a solid rhythm behind you. When I play rhythm on acoustic guitar, I'm the hi-hat. I mean, that's to me what you're supposed to do. Sure, there's little fancy in-between shit you can do, but basically. I'm kind of accenting, where the snare would be too, but that is the thing, You can do all that kind of Townsend that are kind of like drum fills. But to me, if you don't have that kind of rhythm playing first, forget it.
Did you take any lessons?
What's that?
Did you take lessons?
Yeah, I took. My first lessons were like boring reading out of the book. Right. I hated that, and as soon as I could, as soon as I learned to play this. Whoops. That was it. No more books.
Three of the people you mentioned are gonna come up again in this interview, and people who had a big part in your life: Chuck Berry and Simon and Garfunkel. So it's cool that those are examples you use because they're people you got to play with. Were you living in Jersey as a kid?
No, I was living in Buffalo, New York. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm from originally.
Buffalo, okay, yeah.
Upstate. And I'm sorry, I got to keep messing with my hair. It's really hot in this room. I don't have an air conditioner on, and everything is like it's like a swamp in here. So yeah, I was in Buffalo, New York. I was there until I was about let's see, I guess 4th grade. So I'm about 9. And then we moved to New Jersey, like an hour outside of Manhattan. So I was hearing like the radio station up there was a great station called WKBW. And they played, it was an AM radio station, and it was the 60s. So they played everything. It was like before there was like album oriented, FM radio. So like the main station that would play the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Hollies, Small Faces, Sly and the Family Stone, Otis Redding, everything all together. Even I don't remember if I heard Zeppelin yet up there, but so there was no like boundaries, and bubblegum music, and the Monkees, and the Archies, and all that kind of stuff, bubblegum shit too. So and Dylan, and so I grew up on all of that stuff together. There was no like genres, it was, to me, like music was music, and pop music, and if it was good and catchy and had a great melody and had a good feel, that's all I cared about. I wasn't like, oh, this ain't rock enough or whatever. I was a kid. I didn't even know what an amplifier was, distortion, so.
You started playing with your brother, and the Conte brothers kind of begins. You guys played session things and gigs, but you also went to college, which is not always the most rock and roll choice. What made you decide
No,
to do that?
well, it was not a rock and roll choice at all. It was a jazz choice because I found out that I guess I have to kind of go back to take a couple steps back. I was not doing very well when I was basically from 16 to about 19. I was behaving badly with substances, shall we say. And one day I woke up after a typical night out of combining all kinds of substances, alcohol, smokables, and snortables, and eatables. And I woke up on the lawn of a college in the blazing sun at like noon. And I was like, where am I? Oh my God, I'm on the lawn of this college. This must be a sign from God. I'm supposed to stop all this shit. My nose is pouring blood, and I was like, I said, I'm supposed to go to this college and I'm supposed to stop all this stuff. And that's exactly what I did. I just like tunnel vision, stopped doing drugs, stopped drinking for a while anyway, at least enough to, get a foothold in what it was I wanted to do. And I stayed like that with tunnel vision. I'm like, I got to learn guitar. And I started taking lessons with a jazz guitar teacher that my mom, who's a jazz singer, used to play with this guy, Harry Leahy, amazing guitar player from northern New Jersey. He played with Phil Woods, great sax player. And he was just a world-class guitar player. So I started studying with him. And none of that was like really, I studied it and then practiced, and I didn't know why I was doing this stuff, but he was showing me all these scales, and the modes, the Dorians and the Aeolians and Phrygian, and then all these jazzy chords, and I couldn't figure out how to use it all, especially in rock, and there was no way you could really use that stuff in rock anyway. But then when I went, after I got out of that was like a 2-year college that I was in, and basically I just got enough credits to transfer into a good school. So I wanted to go somewhere like happening, like Berkeley or University of Miami, because I was on this like path to like learn guitar and learn music. And I figured I want to be able to play all kinds of stuff, not just the 3-chord stuff I grew up on, which, is great, but I felt like I mastered that kind of stuff. So I always wanted to keep learning. But then I found out that I could go to school in the state that I lived in for not only for free, but like I got a scholarship.
Was that Rutgers?
I went to Rutgers.
Yeah.
And they had a killer jazz program with amazing teachers that were like, actually jazz pros, like performers that are playing out at the Blue Note and, all over the world. And so I was learning from, real pros, not just guys that sat in a classroom and opened a book and told you what to do. They could actually, sit there and blow your mind. So I basically got a free education. I was like, who am I to turn down free education? Because I came from my mom was raising 4 kids by herself, so we fell into the income bracket where I could get this kind of free ride. And I sent my audition tape, and they liked my audition tape, so they let me in, and that's what I did. And for another couple of years, I studied nothing but like Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, and Dizzy Gillespie, and Miles Davis, and Wes Montgomery, and Kenny Burrell, and all that kind of stuff. So that's how. And then then you get out of school, and you're like, well, what am I going to do with this now? Like I like my hair long. I like to sing. I write songs. I like to fucking rock out and have a loud amp. Nobody's going to want me to play on their jazz gig, So I went
So
back.
you played with Blood, Sweat, and Tears instead.
Yeah. So I did. Yes, I did that. That was not long after school. That was probably about 2 years after. So the jazz was kind of still percolating in my head.
You're still kind of a kid too, right?
Yeah, I was a kid, early 20s, and but I eventually, I moved to New York right around that time too, and I saw the guys that were getting all the gigs that I wanted. They were playing with Bowie and Billy Squier and John Waite and all these guys I knew, and nobody was playing any jazz, and they're all just solid, dependable players. They had the right thing, they had the right, they had the right sound, the right touch and tones. So I just focused on that. I was like, all right, fuck all those fancy chords, get back to basics. And I had a blues band, and we really stripped back to basics. I was pretty much playing 1-4-5 progressions, and pentatonics. And if you can say something with those 5 notes, that's a challenge. Because Lord knows everybody plays that scale, and everybody can sound the same unless you really have a personality. So I really worked on trying to have a personality with anything, being able to sing when I play. That was my goal. Even with a 5-note scale. But now I can play 6-note scales.
That's right. This one goes to 6.
Hexatonic scales.
You talk about personality and guitar players who play with personality, but also have it. Chuck Berry comes to mind. Most people know that Chuck Berry toured with pickup bands. He'd get to a city, he'd bring his toothbrush and maybe a backpack, and he would play. You were fortunate to be in one of those bands, right?
Yeah, that. Well, oddly enough, the first rock show I ever saw was Chuck Berry at Madison Square Garden. My dad took me when I was 13. There was a 50s revival show. It was like the Shirelles and I can't remember if it was Bo Diddley or it was like a lot of 50s groups. But I went for Chuck. I remember we waited outside the stage door for him, and he came out. And my dad was like, "Hey, Chuck, how about an autograph for the kid?" And Chuck's like, "No autographs." And we were walking right next to him down 7th Avenue in Manhattan. And he was carrying his guitar case in one hand, and his fucking suit jacket pocket was right here. And I was walking next to him, this little kid, like, this tall, sticking my hand in his suit jacket pocket, thinking, I'm going to find like a pick or a matchbook or something. I'm going to like have something from Chuck Berry. Pocket was empty. But that was my first show. And then here we go. Like, so I'm 15 or whatever. No, I'm 13. So 15 years later, I'm playing a show at the Meadowlands racetrack with Chuck, which was incredible. The promoter had worked with my mom. The promoter was a trumpet player there at the track. He was the guy who went, the bugler, and he booked all the entertainment for the track. So when he booked Chuck said, "Book me a band," And so he called me, and this guy, Frankie Rendell, his name was, he called and said, would you guys like to play behind Chuck? And we're like, hell yeah. And we had been watching that Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll movie that Keith Richards MD'd for, where he was the S&M director, social and musical director. And we had been watching that, you know, and we loved Chuck, and we loved the old records, you know. And so he picks, so Frankie picks up Chuck at the airport that day, and he goes, Chuck goes, who's in my band tonight? Frankie goes, oh, Chuck, you're going to love the band. It's the Conte brothers. You know, John's on bass, Steve's on guitar. He's like, guitar? I don't use no other guitar player. And Frank's like, oh, Chuck, don't worry, man. Steve's really, you know, he can lay back. Chuck's like, all right, well, I'll give him one song. If he ain't happy, I'm going to throw him off the stage. So
No pressure.
You know, before we go on. And no pressure, you know. And Chuck comes backstage, and we're all hanging out in the back room. We're like, yeah, Chuck, man, we're really looking forward to this, you know, and playing your songs the way they were originally meant to be played, you know, with that half swing thing that the drummer and the walking bass. And Chuck's like, don't do that. He goes, that was Keith Richards' idea. So we're like, oh, okay. He's like, bass player, if I do something with my neck, that's what I want you to play. Drummer, watch my foot for the endings. And he goes, and listen to the lyrics. If it wasn't for the lyrics, we'd be playing the same song all night long.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
So we get up there, and I lay way back for the first like 3-4 songs. And I guess he appreciated that. And he does a slow blues. You know the song, It Hurts Me Too? Mm-hmm. When things go wrong with you, it hurts me too. We do that song. And then Chuck goes, solo, gives me a solo. I was like, damn, I thought I was going to get thrown off the stage. Now he's giving me a solo. I play the solo. He says to the audience, can the man play? The man can play. Take another one. Gives me another solo. Then we come back. We do like 5 more Chuck classics, you know, Memphis, you know, Sweet Little Rock and Roller, whatever, Roll the Beethoven. Does the same thing, another slow blues. Can the man play? Take another one. Gives me 2 more solos on that song. And then he breaks then we do Johnny Be Good. And he breaks a string, and he goes in B flat. I'm like, he just popped this high E string. What's going to happen when it comes to the middle? Because that's the iconic solo. Points to me. And there I am playing the one I just played you earlier. First solo I ever learned in my life. And I'm playing it with the man. It was incredible. And I actually have a film. I have never put it up on YouTube or anything, but one of these days I will.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know you have the footage, which is so amazing. Definitely got to share it one day. You know, at the time, you know, Chuck Berry was already a legend, but now he becomes an icon, you know, and he's known for being a bit crazy, if you will. And for you to have that experience with him and play his signature song in front of him, you know, pretty amazing.
I know, it's nuts. I mean, especially since everybody I talked to who's ever played with him, oh, what an asshole. I had a terrible time. He was a real jerk. And I mean, I have nothing but fond memories of it. You know, he was great.
Yeah, it's great to have that. So I think a lot of people watching the show know you from different things. A lot of people know you from the Dolls and know you from Michael Monroe, which we'll talk about. But there's a lot of people who watch my show who were Headbangers Ball audience viewers Saturday nights, 12 to 3 a.m. And Company of Wolves. Yeah, and if you made it to the last hour, you probably saw Company of Wolves. And I think this is one of those bands that just didn't get discovered. Now, you know, you can tell me what you think happened, but it's one of these things where there are these great songs, and maybe you're a little ahead of your time. Maybe for the glam metal, hair metal, you know, it's maybe a little too hip, or I'm not sure. But I think that there's so many great songs there. And so you tell me a little bit about that band and what might have happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were not coming from that bag at all. I mean, we were coming from, I mean, we liked hard rock, you know, but our hard rock was not, you know, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. It was more Aerosmith, Zeppelin, maybe AC/DC.
Faces, maybe. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't even put that in the hard rock category. I mean, we were into
Mhm.
the Stones, the Faces, the Georgia Satellites. Those were like, and Creedence and Tom Petty. Like those were our sort of middle of the road, like meat and potatoes, classic rock, blues rock stuff. And then, for like the glammier, more whatever louder stuff, it was Aerosmith, Zeppelin. But we definitely weren't into, that hair Sunset Strip kind of thing. But we used the Georgia Satellites producer. We used Georgia Satellites amps. We used their studio. That was kind of the path we were on. But then our record label said, well, we don't know how to sell you guys. I mean, look at that photo, like we didn't have, do rags and, makeup and glittery stuff on. We just wore, jeans and boots and t-shirts and so they were like, yeah, we don't know how to sell you to the metal magazines. That's the only place we can get you coverage. We can't get you Rolling Stone or anything yet. So that was the challenge. Was like, here we are, a normal rock and roll band, normal, in this era of all the Sunset Strip. She's my cherry pie, bullshit. I'm sorry if anyone likes that stuff, but I was not a Warrant fan. I do like RATT though. I thought DiMartini's a great player. And yeah, of course, they're a great, I mean, Randy Rhoads, love him. Warren's great. Eddie, of course. But but by the time I sort of formulated my whole trip, it was pre-Van Halen. I was into Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, and so I didn't go for the whole this. I mean, I still can't do that. I can do. Doesn't have to work on acoustic, but that's it. One note is my tapping.
I would say though, that's your Company of Wolves is definitely if I was looking for a Steve Conte shred, I would say that's the probably different than what people might know from your other work or from your solo work, which you get to. I got to ask you about the video "Call of the Wild." This video is obviously an homage to American Werewolf in London, and a really kind of fun video. People can watch it on YouTube. Where was that filmed?
Oh, it's filmed in Scotland.
That's what I thought. It looked real. You actually went to the slaughtered lamb.
Well, that was a we made that sign up, or someone did. But that's you ever see Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Sure.
The castle where they're throwing the English pig dogs and they're throwing like the cattle over the side. Mm-hmm. That's that castle, Doon Castle in Edinburgh. So we went, we were talking to a video director, this guy Ralph Zeman, who did Faith No More, the one with the fish, flopping on the floor, whatever that song is. Epic. Yeah. And we figured, he figured, it was his suggestion. He was like, it'll cost more to bring my crew. I don't know there was some logic behind it. It would be cheaper for us to take my whole crew and go over to Scotland to film than anything else. I was like, okay, I'll go to Scotland. Sure. We hadn't been out of the country yet as a band. So, and in fact, we never played out of the country. So we went over there and we did that video at that castle. And then we did another video with the same team in the LA desert, like a month later or something, for the song The Distance. But that was that video with they're not really wolves, they're Belgian wolfhounds, those animals in that video.
I'll be safe.
They look wolf-like.
They looked wolf-like enough. Company of Wolves 89, 92, bands that were being marketed that way. I mean, you're sharing a label with that had LA Guns and things like that. You're going to get lost in the shuffle. Your music had piano on it, and a little bit more rock than that, as we said, sort of straight. It's a glam. Is there something happening with that band now? Were you planning to really release some of that music?
Yeah, well, we just got the debut album from 1990, Mercury, re-released by Rock Candy, which is a a label in England that do all those kind of bands from that era. Like, I don't know, they did Dirty Looks. Remember Dirty Looks? They were
Sure.
very AC/DC.
Yeah.
Actually, our drummer Frankie LaRocca was an A&R guy for Atlantic. He signed them. He signed Dirty Looks to Atlantic. But this guy Derek Oliver, who runs that label, we released that album this year or late last year, and we got it released finally. It was ever since streaming. It's never been out on the streaming services. So we finally got Polygram to release the streaming services last year. So the debut is now on Spotify and everywhere legally. I think it was up there, maybe a bootleg at some point earlier. But what happened with that whole thing in the label is we didn't have a label president at the time when we came in. It was a headless label. We had a great team of radio people and promo people that really loved the band, but without like a big honcho up there to say, do this now. There was no like deals going on with that usually happen at labels where people go, if you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Like that stuff wasn't happening. And so, we got up as far as we got on the album rock charts, like top 20, a couple of the songs. But, and we got on the Hot 100 Billboard for a week or two. And then it just, we didn't go gold. And we definitely didn't go platinum. So when the new president finally came in, they were like, all right, we're just gonna get rid of any band that didn't sell platinum or at least gold. And the new president was into Vanessa Williams and Tony, all these like smooth R&B acts. That was his preference. So what was he gonna do with us? We weren't even making the label any money, really. So we kind of struggled along with. We did a second album that never came out, and we tried to get that signed to another label, but by that time Nirvana happened, and nobody wanted to know about a band from New York playing rock and roll when everyone had to have a drug problem and long shorts and beards and flannels. So everybody went to Seattle, and even it was funny. All the New York bands that we knew. I mean, we were just doing our thing, and all these rock bands were like, all of a sudden, the guys started growing Fu Manchus, and they started like putting their flannels, around their waists, tied with like long shorts and Doc Martens, and singing songs about heroin and like fucking pretentious shit. Just do what you do. We just did what we did, and then, eventually, when we weren't going to get re-signed, we said, "Well, fuck it, let's break up." Because I want to do my own thing anyway. I want to sing. Like I've always been a singer, but I wasn't the singer in Company Wolf. So me and my brother did our thing. We were called Crown Jewels for a while, and the singer Keith had his own solo career, and we've actually been now that these records have been re-released, we've been talking about doing something new, and we love to play like the M3 or the Monsters of Rock cruise that I just got off of.
It's perfect for those. Yeah, it's the perfect project for those. And now fans can discover things. You can go to Spotify right now, listen to that record, and I think it's the record you don't know that you loved. All the fans of those cruises at M3 will dig this new. Instead of going to see some young band trying to recreate a scene, you can actually hear a band who made a record at the time of the scene. So I think it would be good.
That's what I think. And our focus was always to write the best possible songs. Did we have a definitive style? Like there are some bands that just tried to. I'm not even going to mention who, because you're going to know who I mean. They just rip off the Stones. Let's get a 5-string guitar, tune it to open G, and every song will start, like this. Whatever. We weren't one of those bands. We weren't about to be one of those bands that let's get that little niche and stay in there and have a marketing corner. We loved everything. We loved Cheap Trick. In fact, I think our first review that came out said it was in Rolling Stone. It was a review of Junkyard, London Choir Boys, Black Crowes, Company of Wolves, and it was called "The Blues Will Never Die." Was the title of the article. And these are the 4 new bands to watch out for this year, the new breed of blues band. And they said Company of Wolves careens around the map, which we did. You know, we loved the melodies of the Beatles and Cheap Trick, and we loved the heavy guitars of AC/DC. I didn't see anything wrong with, you know, granted, we didn't combine everything within one song. One song had a bit heavier thing, and another song was a bit more melodic. But I guess, you know, that might have been what separated us from a band that got all the marketing, because they were, you know,
Right. Yeah.
they stayed in their lane. We changed lanes all the time because, you know, I get bored. I'm a musician. You know, I mean, I grew up loving Physical Graffiti and the White Album, and, you know, to me,
Not one thing. Yeah.
that's music. You know, it's like goes from Honey Pie to fucking I'm So Tired to Back in the USSR, you know, or from In the Light to Kashmir. You know, that's the kind of music I loved. But
Yeah. No.
I'm not a marketing guy, so I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes back then everyone was a genius. Doesn't mean they knew how to market it. They thought they did. Get me the next Guns N' Roses, you know. Get me, but at the end of the day, the people making the decisions probably didn't make the best. Which is what's great about music now. People make their own decision. Go online, listen to Company of Wolves. If you like it, you got it. I want to ask you about Paul Simon, because I love asking people about other gigs or maybe non-traditional gigs. In a sense, you became a stand-in for Paul Simon. This is one of the craziest things. You got to tell me how this comes
Not
about.
in a sense, but in reality. I mean, that was my gig. My gig was to be Paul Simon for Paul Simon. So I was basically his stunt vocalist, you know. When he would start rehearsing for a tour, he'd call me up. I mean, I got recommended. I didn't have to audition or anything. My friend was Mark Stewart, great guitar player, cellist, mandolin, multi-instrumentalist. He had played on one of me and my brother's albums, Crown Jewels, Linoleum album. And so he knew my voice. And although he knew I was a rocker, there was the song he had played on for us was a really sensitive ballad. So he knew I had the soft kind of side to my voice too. So he just said to Paul, I know a guy. And he just hired me. I called up and, you know, we negotiated the deal, and I went in the next day, and for 6 weeks we rehearsed 8 hours a day at the SIR here in Manhattan with Steve Gadd on drums and all these great African guys in his band. It was like a 17-piece band, horn section, two percussionists, drum kit. You know, it was insane. And basically I had to learn the whole Paul Simon songbook. They sent me all the CDs. They sent me sheet music, lyrics. I'm not a great reader of music, but I can kind of follow along with. I see the notes on top of the words. I can kind of see the rhythm, which I would refer to it sometimes. And Paul knew every little thing. If I did one thing wrong, I mean, he didn't call me out and embarrass me, but he would. In fact, he gave me compliments in front of the whole band, which I was amazed at, because like Chuck Berry, people all had been saying to me, "Oh man, you know, when you work with Paul, I pity you. You know, Paul's a really tough guy to work for and everything." And Paul was nothing but complimentary towards me, which I was amazed at. You know, so yeah, it was a crazy gig. He would be like, "All right, I'm gonna go out and do this interview now. Steve, take Bridge Over Troubled Water." You know? No pressure. We sing one of the greatest gospel songs ever, you know.
It's crazy. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. You know, you went to school for jazz. You were a singer, songwriter. You played guitar. You played with Billy Squier. You do it, and here you are singing Paul Simon in front of Paul Simon.
It's nuts. Yeah, it's insane. But you know, this is the thing. You know, and I also did all the anime stuff. I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but there was all these Japanese anime cartoons that Cowboy Bebop and all these kind of things that I'm one of the main singers on. That if you go to my Spotify, that's the first thing you see is like this long of like millions of views on all these songs that I didn't even write. I was just a hired singer on for these anime things. But you
anime
know,
and video games. Yeah.
Yeah, video games. Yeah, video games, anime series, movies, anime movies. But none of this stuff would have been possible, I don't think, if I had not gone and gotten a musical education. Because I tell you, I don't know many guys in rock bands that have done all this stuff we've been talking about. They're pretty much, great players for, rock bands, but that's what they do. They're in that lane. And I somehow early on, maybe it's because my mom's a jazz singer and she kind of brought me up to play that stuff. I knew I had to become a better musician to like make a living because I saw her raising 4 kids on her own without a man and without a job. She was musician that without a real job. She sang in nightclubs. And I thought, well, if she can raise 4 kids like that, then it's possible to be a musician for life.
Your versatility is brings you the career you have. You had to be able. People might look at you and go, "Well, he's a rock guy," but not realizing how many other things you brought to the table. And being a session guy working in New York with all these different legends, I got to say though, to finish up on Paul Simon, you came back a few times to do that with Paul Simon. And if being Paul Simon wasn't enough, you also had to be Garfunkel for a minute, right? It's great.
Yeah, I did when they did their reunion tour in 2003. Some days Paul would come late or wouldn't show up, and it would be me and Art, and it would be Conte and Garfunkel. I would sing Paul's part on Sound of Silence or Mrs. Robinson or what's the other one? Scarborough Fair, insane. And then some days Art wouldn't show up or would come late, and it would be Simon and Conte, and I'd sing Art's parts. So, those are the first records I had in my house were Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, Dylan, and Stones.
You're nervous? I know it's a stupid question,
No.
but when you're looking over, do you go, "This is insane"?
I did say this is insane, but no. You know what? I think I learned this from my guitar professor at Rutgers. He was like, "The only cure for nervousness is preparation." And I felt like, I had prepared my whole life for that gig. It's a rare, like I just did a gig the other night. We did a tribute to Jeff Beck with 4 amazing other guitar players and me. And these guys, they play with Sting, they play with Joe Jackson, killer players. They read, they play jazz, they're amazing musicians. And I'm like, in this case, I'm the dirty rock guy, So I get up there but am I nervous? No, I know I'm just going to do what I do, and I'm going to do something different than what they do. So to me, that I'm already separated. I'm a different kind of guy from them. Although, everything they play, I was like, my jaw was on the floor at the time. They were amazing players, but I have a certain energy and carefreeness that maybe they don't have because I could never go in and do what they do, reading and all that clean stuff,
You play with Les Paul. That's not a pretty big honor.
That's true. I did play with Les Paul. And in fact, I started playing. He said, "What tune do you want to do?" I went to the Iridium when I was probably 2005. And he goes, "Well, okay, what tune do you want to do?" Because somebody brought me in and said, "Les, you got to play with Steve. Steve's got to, you should know him." And I was like, "Oh God, of course, please, And he goes, "All right, what tune?" This is in front of the whole crowd. I didn't meet him before. I think I just met him on the stage at the Iridium in New York. He goes, "What song you want to play?" I said, "How about Blue Monk?" Right? Blues. But when it gets to the solo, I start doing, it's a Thelonious Monk song, so I start doing Monk, I start going. And he's like, "What?" He doesn't understand that kind of jazz. He's like an old school, like that kind of jazz, And I was doing like, that kind of jazz. So So he was like, "Let's get out of here." So he ended the song right after my solo. He didn't understand what I was doing.
It's
It was
it's
still a thrill, and he signed my Les Paul.
yeah, no, I think so. Between Chuck Berry, Les Paul, I mean, it's quite Paul Simon, quite the amount of people you're with. I think a lot of people discover you with New York Dolls, and if you're into that kind of music. I know I did. I knew Company of Wolves, but didn't know of you personally. Dolls comes about. I grew up in New York City, was a fan of punk rock music. Obviously, Dolls a huge influence on everybody. Maybe not you though. you
No, no, because well, when they came out, I was a kid, right? So uh, when they came out, I was barely a teen, and I was already then. I was on my path to like I wanted to know music. I wanted to know what is that thing Jimmy Page does? What is that thing that Hendrix is doing? And I studied those records and I slowed them down. And everything that we do as kids to learn instruments, but I wanted to learn the complicated stuff. I didn't, uh, I mean, I had already done that personality crisis kind of stuff when I was 13. So, by the time, I got to New York, or well, not really, by the time I got out of high school, I was doing, I was learning Yes songs by ear off the record, and the Rain song by Zeppelin. I didn't even know that he played in alternate tunings. I was learning it in regular tuning with some crazy voicing that I make myself figure out, whatever. I didn't realize it was all like open strings because Page just, got it open. And what was the other thing? Well, I don't know. There was, I did a lot of figuring out of. Once I learned something and I figured it out, I would take it all over the neck, and I was my own teacher.
you knew everybody in New York City. You had a reputation. You knew the other players, the session players. You worked with tons of people. You were around. And when it came time to get a version of the Dolls back together, David Johansen was looking for recommendations. And I lived in New York. I saw David Johansen all the time. He was, your real New Yorker. Not everybody recognized him. He walked around. I think the
They thought
Dolls'
he was
legacy. Say it again.
A lot of people thought he was Mick Jagger when he walked around. He used to hate that.
Thought he was Mick Jagger. Some knew Buster Poindexter as well, but he was your New York kind of guy, and he knew who to ask. And you came highly recommended. You're an Italian guy. You got big hair.
Big nose, big hair, Gibson guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, and it was I remember early on, some people were like, there were these hardcore Dolls fans, these girls. It was like 3 girls that used to come to every show, and I overheard them once going, "Johnny Wannabe." I'm like, I never wanted anything less than to be Johnny Thunders. I mean, he was not on my radar at all as a guitar player. I wanted to copy a style. I wanted to copy. If there was any similarity between our styles, I mean, besides the Italian big nose and lots of dark hair, I probably got the hair thing from Keith Richards, who I think he got it from, and Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart, and that's what I was going for, and Bowie.
But similar influences, guitar-wise. Johnny Thunders listened to a lot of things that you listen to.
Chuck Berry and Keith Richards. So that was always my thing. It was like, how am I going to fill this, this chair, these shoes? And I'm not going to, just copy what he did. Of course, if there was a song where, the riff had to be, Subway Train, whatever, I would do the main riff. But then when it came time for a solo, I might do my own thing, unless there was a real signature thing. But he always kind of played the same. He always played, or he basically had 5 licks, Johnny.
Yeah, no, he definitely.
But he played them like his life depended on it, and that's that's what
Yeah.
What?
It might have sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I didn't understand as a kid, that about rock attitude.
Mhm.
I mean, I did at first. I did understand it. I knew all that stuff instinctively when I first started playing, and when I figured out how to play by ear and all that. And then, when you start learning stuff from like fancier chords and teachers and stuff, then maybe you start getting into like a study head. But no one can ever teach you feel, which I had from the beginning, and no one can teach you attitude, which was
Attitude.
in there, but I kind of my brain took over, and I wanted to be, I just wanted to be a good player, So the rock attitude thing wasn't high on my priority list. But once I got back, and once I got into the Dolls and started listening, I was like, this is all about attitude and playing less. And so I kind of just,
Less is more. Yeah.
yeah, I
You had a
went,
meeting with Johansson, right? You went to meet at like was it a coffee shop or a diner in New York?
yeah, the Cosmic Coffee Shop in Manhattan, and we didn't play any music. We just chatted for an hour, and then he had this manila envelope in his hand. He was like, "So I took the liberty of making you this, burning you these CDs. What do you think? You want to do this gig or what?" I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay." And we thought it was just one gig at the World Festival Hall, and that was going to be it, right? And we walked outside the coffee shop, and just then there was some other friends of mine, music friends, coming down the street. And they saw me and Johansson walking out of there, and they're like, "What's going on here?" I was
Mhm.
like, "Can't say," But then, next thing you know, we do the gig, and then unfortunately, Arthur Kane dies.
Yeah, well,
And
Morrissey really did this. He got love him or hate him, Morrissey got the Dolls back together
yeah,
for his festival, and Arthur was still alive. There's a great documentary about the life he was living, working. He's Mormon in the
yeah,
library at the church. I mean,
yeah, yeah, the Latter Day Saints in L.A. Yeah,
yeah, he was no longer with the punk rock character you would have thought he was, but a fascinating guy. And you had a great line that he said to you. When you were talking about learning the songs and coming in for the first time, you also do a great Arthur Kane voice. He thought it was meant to be. He had a reason why.
oh, I know why, because I told him that Billy Murcia, the Dolls' first drummer, his family moved to my town. I was living in this little, when we moved from Buffalo to New Jersey, outside Manhattan, Matawan, New Jersey, little, bedroom community, as they called it. It was like 50 minutes from Manhattan on the train, and the Murcia family lived near Sylvain in Queens, and they moved from Queens to Matawan, New Jersey. And so I would be walking down the highway, and this dude would, with like really long curly hair and big elephant bells, these giant bell bottoms and big platforms, crazy shirts. He would go, "Hey man, hey man, who's this guy? Hey man, you know who you look like?" I'd be like, "What?" He goes, "My name is Alphonse Murcia. My brother was Billy Murcia." I was like, "Oh shit." He's like, "Yeah, you look like Johnny Thunders." And I was like, "I don't know who that is." And he brought all the records to my house, and played me the Criminals and the Heartbreakers and the Dolls, and the record that Bowie wrote about his brother Billy Doll, with Aladdin Sane. So he brought all those records to my house, and so I knew Billy Murcia's brother, and all his brothers, his whole family. And when I told Sil and Arthur this, we went out after one of the rehearsals, and Arthur was like, "Oh my God, it was meant to be, Steve." I was like, "Okay, if I got Arthur saying that, then he goes, this is destiny. This is your destiny." It's like,
All these guys are characters. So
yeah,
those speaking of characters, I can't not mention the late Sylvain. Sylvain, did he call you Jackson when he first met you?
of course. And I have his guitar.
How incredible!
This
Wow,
is the one that he used
look at that.
on the album "One Day It Will Please Us." And yeah, and the tours. I got it a few years ago from the guy he sold it to. He actually sold it for his cancer treatments
Yeah.
to this
He,
guy.
he
And this guy bequeathed it to me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it's in good hands. I'm glad we got to see it. Here's the album. But Sylvain was a character. I managed a band here in Vegas called Sin City Sinners, which featured Todd Kearns, who tours with you sometimes, in
Oh
Michael
yeah.
Monroe. And we went to see the New York Dolls perform. We had a show in California. We rushed back to see the Dolls perform in Las Vegas at a place called Jillian's. It's not there anymore. And we got to see you play with the Dolls. And I remember we had sitting with Jake E. Lee. Jake E. Lee was a giant Dolls fan. He was a giant punk
I didn't
fan.
know that.
Hmm. And we're sitting there watching it. Just can't believe we're seeing the Dolls. Now, Arthur had passed, obviously, by that point. He did the two shows. Um, but it was something magical about seeing these guys on stage and seeing you guys honor that music, and not something that people were going to get. Unfortunately, it takes people a long time for this resurgence to come back and people to figure out what they may have missed at the time. But we got involved with having Sammy come out and do some shows with us. Sammy saw Todd, and I think it's a funny small world, how all these things happen. Dolls becomes a big part of your life for a lot of years. Something that you weren't obviously looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I got the gig. I have a guitar player friend, John Paris, legendary guy. He played with Johnny Winter. He's a guitar player, harmonica player, blues aficionado, just phenomenal player. And he goes, he says to me, all those years, Steve, all that practicing, all that working out and practicing guitar, and now you got a punk rock gig. And he goes, but it's the punk rock gig. And I said, yeah, well, if you're going to play in a punk rock band in New York City, that's the band to have or to be in. And, let's face it, there were not that many. There were no well-known legendary New York bands that you could just step in that, the original guitar player was missing somehow, not just like, oh, they broke up and this guy's arguing with this guy. I mean, Thunders was not here anymore. So, there was a vacancy if the band ever got back together. I never thought about it. I never dreamed about it. I never crossed my radar,
People
And
tried to. People were a little tough on it at the time. How could you have the New York Dolls without this guy, and Jerry? But when you look at bands now who are touring, you got like the cousin of the original guy and no original members. And it was something special. You had three of the guys when it started, and the other two had passed. There's nothing you can do.
Look, it's like the Stones, the Who. You got Mick and Keith. Really, they're the two originals now. You got Pete and Raj. You got I can't even think of any other bands from that era that are still going. But they would call us the Two York Dolls after a while, and just like they would call the Who the Two.
My favorite introduction that Sylvain would do before the song "Trash." I don't know how it came about. I said I got to ask Steve.
Would
He
you like
would
some
say,
coffee?
"Go ahead." Yeah.
Would you like how about a nice cup of coffee? Sure.
Where did that come from?
I don't know where that came from. I think he when he remade the song, I think he did that in the studio, and it's on that record. Is it "Sleep Baby Doll"? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the solo records it's on.
Would you like
And he
some
does that,
coffee?
so he started doing that live whenever we played it.
When I first met him, we were gonna, Todd was gonna sing the Dolls songs with him, and he said to me, "What's his name again?" And I said, "Oh, that's Todd." And he goes, "I'm gonna just call him Jackson." And any name he didn't remember was Jackson. I was Jackson for a while. Sammy said he was Jackson. You've been Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a term of endearment. I don't think it had anything to do with not remembering someone's name, because he certainly knew my name.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jackson. That's pretty much that was his name for everyone. But I was going to tell you early on in the beginning, there were these three girls that would come to every Dolls gig, and they would go, "Johnny Wannabe," and I never tried to do that or be that. I'm just the way I am. I have fucking nose and hair and Gibsons and and I did my homework to be able to you know play in that hang in this group of uh instinctual players. It wasn't like about great musicianship and like who can do what and who's got how much chops. Instinctive feel, and that was my thing. So
They
anyway,
didn't want to. They didn't want a junkie. That was a moment in time. Johansson was used to working with those New York musicians,
that's
and
yeah, that's what I always say. He's because he also had this guy Brian Coonan, who was his musical director for Buster Poindexter. He had him come in as he used to call him the professor, because he was not a rock guy. He had little glasses and short hair. He put a hat on him, and you see him on the album cover. He's the guy in the back with the music paper. But he had him there because he had been his musical director, and just in case, he had to corral Arthur and Sylvain into, learning what to do or whatever. He would have somebody to to depend on. And he had been working with Jimmy Vivino, who's one of the guys who recommended me from the Conan band, and Larry Saltzman, who was his guitar player in the Harry Smiths. These guys play with everybody, and they're great studio musicians, great musicians. So they had all told him, don't call anybody else. Call Conte. He's got the right guitars. He's got the right look. So, it was like casting,
and those guys approved of you. That's really all that matters at the end of the day. If Sylvain and Johansson and even Arthur wanted you there, there's no better endorsement. 2010, after 6 years with the Dolls, it comes to an end. Now, I know Sammy introduced you to Michael Monroe and wanted you to come out and play on a record. Why did the Dolls? Sammy told the story on my show. I just don't remember. Why did the Dolls end for you guys?
I can't answer for Sammy, but for me, I had just had a kid. I had my first son. I have two boys now. So 2009, I had my first son, and I think this is the way it happens with reunions. At first it's like, wow, I can't believe it. The Dolls are back together. And for the first couple of years, it's up here, and like we play Irving Plaza, 3 nights in a row, and then the next year it's a little bit less. Next year it's a little bit less. Finally, 5 years on, we had to keep going different places. Eventually we went to Croatia and Australia and Russia and Japan, and we went to Japan early on, but we started having to go places that we hadn't been before because these places hadn't seen us yet, but we weren't working that much. So I had said to David, what's happening with the show? And he's like, yeah, we're gonna look for new management, we're gonna look for new booking agent. And I was like, okay, because baby boy needs shoes, and 6 months later, nothing had improved, and I was like, what's going on? What's the latest? And he and his wife were like, well, we were thinking about making some calls, but we haven't gotten around to it. And I was like, man, I can't wait. I got to take other work, And at that point, Sammy had called and said, hey, you want to come and check the Michael thing out? And I said, sure, I got to work. So I went out to LA and we rehearsed and we did this string of gigs. We played Vegas, we played San Francisco, and we ultimately ended up in Austin at the South by Southwest. And at that point, Michael's manager, pulled me into a meeting and said, we like you. You want to join the band? And, joining a band versus being a sideman, it's like, okay, you make more money as a sideman. But I thought about it. And I went, I don't want to just be a sideman, not for this situation. I want to be able to write, because with the Dolls I was writing. And so it would have been a step backwards to just like take a gig where I'm just somebody's guitar player and just hired to do that, So
Mhm.
I knew I wanted to write and have more of a you know put my stink on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, involvement, and you probably also knew that the Dolls was the chance of them making another record was going to be slim at that point, and I think you wanted to keep working. I mean,
Yeah,
activity is part of it.
that was the main thing. Just keep working. It wasn't, I loved playing with the Dolls. I mean, the difference between the Dolls and Michael, it's like um, the Monroe band is coming from the Dolls, yes, but then also, the Dead Boys and Lords of the New Church and, Iggy and, stuff that the Dolls didn't come from because they were contemporaries, right? But
Yep.
Michael and Sammy liked all that stuff, all that sort of garagey, glammy, gothic, whatever. So, and to me, I like, I love the sort of 60s blues, boogaloo, R&B thing that the Dolls had. The Michael thing doesn't have as much R&B and blues. It's more straight up, you know.
You joined that band
Oh,
2000 yeah, yeah. 2010 you joined that band, you're still in it to this day,
yeah.
and it's an interesting band. That show in Vegas you talked about that I was at, it's the first time Michael Monroe had ever even been to Vegas. That's how crazy it was. Hanoi's career obviously shut down early in the States. There's versions that come back here and there. Were you a Hanoi fan? Were you
No,
familiar?
same thing.
Mhm.
Same thing with Hanoi. Because that was happening in the early 80s, and that was prime jazz time for me. Like with the punk thing too, like 77. um I wasn't into jazz yet, but I was into Jeff Beck, Mahavishnu Orchestra, um you know Prague, Yes, Kansas, Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Blackmore. Anything that you had to be a good player for was what I was into. So I didn't get into Hanoi. I wasn't into the image. Image didn't mean anything to me back then. You know, I still had my hair long, but I didn't dress glammy. I mean, I was playing at ES 175, up here,
Mhm.
trying to be Grant Green and Kenny Burrell. So yeah, I didn't know anything about Hanoi. I didn't hear any of those records. I mean, they didn't play them on MTV,
Nope.
so you really had to dig deep, I think, or maybe just be a reader of those like Metal Edge kind of magazines or whatever. Or I don't know what magazines they would have been in back then.
When Hanoi came out on MTV, a lot of us thought they were still together. No one knew. Up Around the Bend came out. We thought it was a new video. No one knew that, unless you really knew or you lived in LA or you saw those magazines. People didn't know that there was no more Hanoi.
I never saw that video. I never saw anything by Hanoi on video, or I never even saw a photo of them until I remember seeing their name around when I got to New York. Like, and that I didn't move to New York till like '85, and they were already broken up. So it was probably just I mean, you see broken up bands on covers of magazines.
Mhm.
It was probably that. But no, I'd never heard anything. But again, once I started listening to it, I started appreciating. Oh, now I can see where Guns N' Roses got this thing from, and from
For sure.
a song like "Welcome to the Jungle" with all the different parts. It's like that's right out of Underwater World. Not to mention the lyrics.
And it's an interesting thing to be in that band, and now such young fans are attracted to it. You must see it. When you play with Michael Monroe, you look at this crowd. These people weren't born when Hanoi broke up.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's insane. There were 15-year-olds at a show recently. And it's a beautiful thing. That happened with the Dolls too, And when I first started playing with Michael, and we went to Finland, it was like Beatlemania. I mean, literally, there were 14-year-old kids all in, leopard and zebra, pink hair, pierced everywhere, tattooed, green hair, outside the venue, like a line around the block, crying when we came in, like, "Can I have your autograph?" I mean, it was insane. And then, like with the dolls, after a few years, it's like, oh, it's them again,
Mhm. Yeah,
you become,
it's a
become
what a
familiar,
what a commute for you to play in a
Yeah,
band. Everyone's from different places, and you got to come in. You got to make records. And I will say, one of the things I enjoy about Michael Monroe is that I enjoy the solo records. Your music comes out. We don't know these songs. It doesn't have the push that it used to. But when you go see the show, the songs are so catchy. I saw it 4 times. I saw it twice on the cruise. I saw it at the Whiskey with Slash playing with you, and then I saw it at the Rainbow as well. And the songs stay in your head real fast. You're going to be singing 1978, won't get out of your head, or a lot of these other ones, because he's still making great music. And I think it shows for you and Rich writing songs with him, and Sammy too, writing songs with Michael, that you have an involvement. That this is a band. It's not just here's the Hanoi songs.
right. Yeah, and the way it's gone through the albums, the first album was Ginger from the Wild Hearts was with us, and I kind of stepped into that thing. So they kind of already had their nucleus, and I was like the new guy. So I didn't do a whole lot of writing for that record. I'm a writer on 78 and Bombs Away and Center of Your Heart, something else. But Got Blood, that's one I brought in. But then when Ginger left and Dragon joined the band, they were all like, "Oh shit, we just lost our main songwriter. Who's going to write songs for us now?" And I'm like, "Hello, I'm over here." They didn't really know me as that. So I wrote almost I'm definitely a writer on every song on Horns and Halos, but I had 2 songs that I brought in. Ballad of the Lower East Side is my song, 100% my song, and
Needs to come from a New Yorker. And I listen to these songs and I go, a New Yorker wrote that or was involved in it.
Michael likes to, because I wrote it in his voice. I said I lived down on 3rd Street way back in the day, but I didn't live on 3rd Street. But I'm singing it like I'm thinking, how can I get Michael to get into this song? Make it about him, So that's what I learned early on writing for him. And, then he likes to, of course, take advantage of that and say, yeah, well, I lived on 3rd Street. And I'm like, you going to tell him who wrote it? No? Okay. So, but that's how that dynamic goes. So, we, me and Michael have never sat down to write a song. He usually, I think Rich has written a couple songs with him. We have somehow Horns and Halos. I think Michael was a writer on. Me and him and Dragon came up with some of the lyrics together. But we don't sit down like Beatles style with acoustic guitars and go, how about this, how about that? It's usually like Rich presents a song or I present a song and it gets recorded just like we demoed it. It's rare that we sit around and craft something from scratch. Although on this new album, we're working on a new album right now, and we have I think 2 songs on there. Yeah, we did a session last summer where we rented a big house in Finland, and we kind of sat around and jammed, and we came up with like 4 or 5 songs, and 2 of them made this record, and they're really good.
It's crazy how much you've been around the world. You look at the beginning stories of playing around, a kid from Jersey learning jazz. Now, yeah, I got to go back to Finland, and then travel around the world. It seems like this last tour you did really well in the States, because there's been an absence in Michael here for a long time. There's visa issues, whether it's too expensive. Who can get in other Hanoi members' cases? They've had that issue. Andy McCoy was on the show promoting his trip to America. That never happened.
I remember.
It was one of the craziest. interviews I did. Yeah.
Karma is a
Yeah.
bitch.
Pretty crazy, yeah. So you're living this life, you're making the music, and like I said, it did better here in America, I think, than people might have expected. A lot of sold out shows, and a desire to see Michael back here. So I think the talk seems to be that you guys will be back sooner than later in the
I hope
States.
so, because now everybody's got visas that last 2 or 3 years, so we could literally come back anytime. I mean, we'll probably wait a year, but we'll probably come back, and I don't think this year again, but probably early next year or something. But yeah, we go. Our main markets have been Finland, of course, UK, and Japan. And we kind of dip our toe, and we do a little Spain, we do a little Italy, we do a little Germany, little Sweden, Copenhagen, Denmark, even Norway. We played Russia too, but that's we Belgium once we played. We have never played the Netherlands, which I have a big connection with because my wife is Dutch and I lived there. But I wish we'd play Holland, but we haven't played there ever. But that's what I would like to. I like getting the frequent flyer miles, but it would be nice to play closer to home more often.
Yes, I completely understand. Now, we talked about your career. There's a few things I missed, but I can't keep you all day. Now, we talked about the projects that you've stepped into and sort of adapted to. Well, the project that's closest to your heart and is Concrete Jangle, which is your music, Steve Conte's solo music, which I really enjoy. I kind of dived into it, and there's really fun videos you can check out on YouTube for the singles as well. But your style of music. So I didn't exactly know what to expect. I'm just going to listen, and no, this isn't Hanoi or the Dolls, but you can tell your influences, and you can tell your influences XTC. You can tell the replacements. You can tell these, pop, uh, you know, big hooks, big choruses, big melodies, and just such catchy songs. And then as I'm listening to it and sort of digging deeper, realizing that Andy Partridge, the legend of XTC, they were a co-writing duo. You got him to co-write a part of this album with you. Not an easy feat. Those guys can't get anything together these days. So, at first, how do you meet him? And second, what is it like working with one of your heroes?
It was incredible. I don't remember exactly the first communication we had, but I met Andy, he became aware of me. I was aware of him since 1982. Yeah, so when Hanoi was coming out, I was listening to XTC. That was my jam. Like during the punk era, I was only into 4 rock bands: The Police, The Pretenders, XTC. 3 rock bands: Police, Pretenders, XTC, because I thought they were the most musical. I mean, I liked a couple Clash songs that I heard, and I liked some other like new wave stuff, but I got religious about those bands. I got every record. I loved James Honeyman Scott. I loved Dave Gregory, the guitar player from XTC, phenomenal. And of course, Andy Summers. So I was more of a new wave, because they were taking the attitude of punk, but they were adding more musicality to it. It wasn't just guys shouting angrily over 3 chords. It was like there was some fancier chords, some nicer sounds, some more poetic lyrics and ideas. So that's what I was listening to in '82, and sorry, my phone's going off here. The Replacements and all that stuff too. Another one of my favorite bands. But so when I met Andy, so the way I met Andy, going back to that, a guy who was repairing my guitars in New York had built a guitar for Andy, and I was at his shop one day, and I said, "What's that thing?" And he was like, "Oh, I made that for Andy Partridge." I'm like, "You know Andy Partridge?" I said, "Oh my God, you got to give him, please, will you give him my record?" And I had done this record with my brother. I'm going to get it and show it to you. I think I have it somewhere. Here it is. The Contes bleed together. And it's very quirky. Power pop, but there's like some crazy like lounge weirdness and like country, and it's just like, you know, it's another White album. The White Album is always my 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 measurement stick, my yardstick. So he gave Andy the record, and Andy didn't contact me or anything, but I had heard through my friend Dennis Fano, he builds guitars, that Andy really liked the record. Then cut to, boy, it must have been 2014, because he liked my Steve Conte NYC album. I somehow got him a copy of that, and he started giving me nice reviews. I remember what it was. I had met Steve Lillywhite, the producer, at a party, and we became really close. And one day we were chatting on Twitter, and I brought up Andy and XTC, and he's like, "Oh, Andy's on Twitter, you know. Why don't we rope him into this conversation?" So I was already playing with the Dolls by that time, and Andy wrote, "You stole my dream gig." He wrote to me, and I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, "Yeah, guitar player in the New York Dolls." I'm like, "What?" Andy Partridge wanted to be the guitar player in the New York Dolls. I mean, I just can't this bespectacled, you know, balding.
Amazing.
And like, yeah, before XTC, they had a band called Star Park, him and Colin, and they both had really long hair, and they were like into the glam thing. And he had written David Johansen a letter saying, you know, that he wanted to join the Dolls after this is like 75 probably when after they broke up in Florida, you know, that whole mess. And but it never happened.
Naki Lawless was in the Dolls. It's even more ridiculous.
Yeah, for like 2 gigs or whatever. Yeah. So you know, that sort of started our relationship, you know, and we kept in touch, and he's, you know, every record he would give me like really nice reviews. I don't think to just be kind. I would think someone of his genius, you know, wouldn't have time to just blow smoke up somebody's ass, you know, especially someone who's not hugely famous, you know. So, but he was giving me really nice compliments and reviews of my stuff. So I thought, you know what? Here it is, 2022. I had done an album called Bronx Cheer for Little Steven's label, Wicked Cool Records, and that record, you should check that record out. That's before the one before Bronx Cheer. It's a little more R&B, and it's punky, New York attitude, garagey, but there's also some real soulful, like R&B kind of influence stuff. And I said to Andy, I wrote him an email. I said, "Andy, would you like to write my next Wicked Cool single for me?" Because it was time for me to do a new single, maybe an album, but I thought at least one song. So Andy was like, "Well, Steve, I sort of swore off writing with other people, but it's not a no." So I was like, "Okay, great. I'll take that as a possible yes." So I immediately, you know, worked up a really cool arrangement with like mellotrons and you know, beatly guitars, and it was just kind of psychedelic I'm the Walrus kind of thing. And I sent it to Andy, and I said, "How about something like this?" And he goes, "Well, that's good, but it sounds too finished already." He goes, "Why don't we start something from scratch? We can do a Zoom." And I went, "Yes." So we did a Zoom, 2-hour Zoom, and we came up with 4 song ideas.
Wow.
And then I took those away, and I made demos, and I would send them to him, and he'd comment on the demos, you know, change this lyric. And you know, we just had, when I say we wrote 4 songs, it was like the beginnings, the germs of, you know, we had like 1 verse, 1 chorus. If we had a verse one and first chorus, that's all we came up with. And then I came up with all the rest. I came up with verse two. I came up with bridge, outro, arrangement, and I would send that to him, and then he would, maybe weigh in on maybe it should be 2 extra bars here at the end of the bridge or whatever. But I played them for little Steven, and Steven's a very busy guy. You never know if he's just too busy to listen to the stuff that you send him, or if he doesn't like it. So I was like, I didn't hear anything for a while from Steven, so I was like, maybe he hates it. So I said, Andy, I think we maybe need to write a couple more songs and maybe put on our Dukes of the Stratosphere hats. You know the band Dukes of the Stratosphere that he had? It was like a 60s pastiche of the psychedelic bands from like 67. I said, let's get garage, psychedelic garage on this. And then we came up with 4 more songs. I brought in 4th of July. He had We Like It, chorus idea. What else? Shoot Out the Stars was my title. And I don't remember, maybe One Last Bell. Yeah, it was the last 4 we wrote. First time we wrote Hey, Hey, Hey. What else? I can't remember. Anyway, it was amazing writing with him. We sat down just like this with the 2 Zoom. I know this is not Zoom, but
same idea. Yeah, 2 screens.
Yeah, 2 screens. I could see him, he could see me. But the only drag is, you can't play in tempo. You're not synced. So if we're playing something together, we're not going to be together. So he would play his idea, and then I would go, oh, you mean? And then I play it, and he played it back, and we'd go back and forth like that. And that's how we came up with all this stuff. And it was incredible. The way he writes is, there was one song where he goes, oh, and he's got all these little tricks. Like, he's like, okay, what's the song that you wish you had written? He's got all these little tricks for, like, if you're stuck, try this. So he's like, give me a song that we were going through books of titles. I was like throwing out titles to him, and he liked Shoot Out the Stars. I would throw out a hook. 4th of July, he liked my hook, my chorus, and he wrote that. But he said once, what song do you wish you wrote? And I said, song by the Hollies called King Midas in Reverse. And he's like, ooh, that's a good one. And he play. I don't know if this is the chord in King Midas in Reverse, but it's an F at the first fret with an open G string, right? F add 9. And I was like, wow, I never wrote a song in F before. Okay. And he was like, yeah, what could it be? He goes, sounds like a bell. And he's like, well, it should be a nursery rhyme kind of a melody. And he starts saying, one last bell is ringing out. Oh. So he hears a chord. He sees a picture in his mind, and that's how he writes songs. It's incredible.
Amazing.
He sees everything like cinematically. What does it look like? And then what does it, what would this be the soundtrack to if it was a movie? That's the way he thinks. And I've been trying to think like that, but let me tell you, it's not easy.
No.
I think it's, what is it called? There's a word for it. I don't know if it's aphasia. It's got some kind of fancy psychological term, like where people can hear color or, taste sound. I don't know.
You'd love to pick his brain about what he was thinking when he wrote those XTC songs.
I know some of the stories because he's told me, and I've also I've read every interview from him.
Yeah, just to have that kind of mind and to think of the pictures that go with the music. There's so much. I enjoy this record. I think people watching will enjoy it too. It's easy to listen to on Spotify or wherever you get your music. There's videos on YouTube. SteveConteMusic.com. Also, you got merch. You can get tour dates. Find out a little bit more about your bio. There's the record, Concrete Jangle, which as again is available now. Steve, I appreciate you spending some time and just talking about such a great career. I do this every day, and some days the stories are crazier than others or more interesting. And just this life, you've lived this maybe a journeyman life, but this thing where it just keeps moving, and you just never know what's next. You follow your dreams while moving forward.
Yeah, that's and I hope there's more to come. I mean, of course, I'm going to keep putting out records of my own. I'll keep working with Michael as long as that's happening. But I still have some goals, some people I'd like to play with someday, and I'll put it out there. I want to play with Chrissy Hine, God damn it. I want to play with Robert Plant, God damn it. I want to play with Shaka Khan. I'd love to play with Roger Daltrey. Just the classics. I'd love to play with Keith. I'd love to play with Mick. I'd love to play with Paul. I'd love to play with Rod. I actually got a call to play with Rod once, but never happened. But so I still have my heroes that I'd like to do something with, write a song, play on a track, join their band. I don't know, but
it's good for you not to be bored, though. You can't just do one thing. That's not who you are. And so there's still a lot more options out there.
Yep.
Steve, I appreciate it, and I thank everyone for watching. Check out stevecontemusic.com. Link is in the description. The new album, The Concrete Jangle, is available now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody. See ya.